Hi, it's Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Career Coach Office Hours for January 25th, 2022. I spend some time Tuesdays and Fridays at 9:15 a.m. Eastern talking with you about some elements. Well, I'll just simply say I'm going to answer questions about job search, hiring more effectively, management, leadership, and if you have a question about some workplace related issues, like some people do, put that into chat. I'll respond to it. And if you have a question between shows, you can always email it to me at thebiggamehunter@gmail.com. And in the subject line, just put the phrase office hours, and I'll organize it for the next episode. Remember, if you send it to me in advance, you don't have to be live to ask the question. All you have to do is rewatch the show. And this way, you'll get your question answered, and I'm here to help. Okay. So I start off these shows with what I call a coffee toast. And it's for those of you who care. You go to work every day, you get to your desk, you sit down, log in, and it matters to you about what you do. All in all, you care, and you're taken for granted too often. It is assumed because you show up for work each day. And that's all they do is they assume you're going to show up. And it's only in your absence that anyone really appreciates you and all that you've done and all that you keep doing day in and day out. So a quick toast to you so that in this way you get acknowledged for all that effort that you put in. And now I've got a whole boatload of questions. And again, if you've got a question for me, put your question into chat about job search, hiring better, management, leadership, or advice about a particular topic that has some import to you, okay? So like I said, a ton of questions today. Let me get to the first one. Bear with me. How much does major matter in a job application? Now, if you're a rookie trying to get into the field, your major and your grades are important. So, for example, you have a degree in accounting and you're applying for a job as a psychologist, there's an obviously a disconnect in there, right? So they don't have a lot of criteria to evaluate and assess you unless it's from your major. And that becomes the conversation point. And then there's the grades and where you went to school and what you learned there. As a rookie, it's important. However, the more experienced you get, it starts dropping off the radar, except as a foundation for where you're evolving to today. So understand that, the more experience you get, the less important your college major is. And certainly high school doesn't matter at all. But again, at the beginning, it does because they get a chance to weigh you as a person and how you think about your major and how you think about your school, yada, 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 and can come to conclusions about you from that. And again, after a while, it just doesn't matter. Why is it important to have both men and women on the hiring committee when interviewing potential new employees? Everyone has a different perspective on hiring. Men look at it one way, women may look at it in a different way. And some men may look at it as women do. But the idea is to get a broad viewpoint, to look at someone from different angles. And gender is one of them, race is another. In certain areas, religion can be a third. Obviously, in the United States, you're not supposed to discriminate based upon race, gender, sexual orientation. There's a whole list of criteria for which bias is not supposed to be part of the process. And we all know it is. And by having a diverse hiring team involved in the evaluation, blind spots can be minimized. And thus, that's the goal, is to hire quality people. And firms miss consistently because individuals don't relate to the experience of the people that they're talking to. So, for example, I remember a podcast interview I listened to. It was an African American uh, software systems engineer at Twitter. And unless you knew to ask him a slightly different question, instead of tell me about yourself, which goes right into the workplace, but if you learn to ask the question, how'd you get here today? Like, what's your background? Not just simply professionally, but personally, that brought you into my office today. You never learn that this guy traveled on the bus an hour and a half each way to school through gang territory, where for a certain part of the ride, everyone hid. And that this helped to shape his experiences. It demonstrates the care that he has for his profession. And you never know that unless you ask a slightly different question. And thus, having that homogeneous hiring team misses things. Heterogeneous, gender, race, sexual orientation, country of origin, a whole host of things is ideal in the evaluation process. And if you don't have it, if for some reason your entire workforce all looks a particular way, there's a message in that for you. You could be missing things that have an impact upon your organization. Third question: is it normal for recruiters to be rude during the counteroffer phase? Counteroffer phase. Okay. So I'm not sure if you're talking about corporate recruiters or third-party recruiters. So I'll try and deal with both. With third-party recruiters, for those of you who don't know, I worked in recruiting for more than 40 years and filled a lot of positions over the course of my career. And, when someone called me up to say, I'm considering a counteroffer, I know my heart started to beat faster. And that's because I knew I was losing a fee at that point, and I would have to fight to preserve it. So I'd go back and review my notes and say, when we first spoke, you told me that what was important to you was getting away from your boss, or higher salary, or better work, whatever it was. They'd list a couple of things to me. And just remember, as you go into this conversation, unless they're changing your group, you got the same boss. And unless they're changing the work, there's no change in work-life balance, but they're going to promise you all sorts of things. And I would remind them of some of the things. But all in all, I was anxious. So you could interpret that as rude because I was scared, or you could look at it as Jeff was scared and was concerned about losing a sizable amount of income. I think under those conditions, if someone said to you, you're at risk of losing your job, well, you might be scared too. And that's what happens to agency recruiters. Now, corporate recruiters, it's a different scenario. They may be annoyed or, excuse my language, pissed off because you've done something or caused them a problem. Same thing with your boss, your manager. You're causing them a problem because you're threatening to leave. And now you're expecting them to do something and change that. And they've got to, I don't want to say beg you to stay, but encourage you to stay and involve other people and make commitments to you. It's a lot of work. And you are not an obedient girl or boy. So if they seem annoyed, you've just caused extra work for them that they didn't expect to have. And thus, that could be what you're picking up on. Does a software engineer who aced all the interview rounds, like coding, system design, behavioral, etc., but failed to impress the hiring manager, still have a shot at getting hired? Probably not. Every once in a while, rarely, it gets through that. But since you didn't ace the hiring manager and you're working for them, remember, it's ultimately their decision, not the team. The team is recommending whether you're qualified, and the hiring manager is looking at you as their subordinate. I don't know how you didn't impress them. And, perhaps on the day of the interview, you were not so good on your coding questions or design or answering behavioral interview questions. I don't know. But fundamentally, you didn't impress them. And thus, it's probably come to an end. And every once in a while, I get surprised, but it's a rare occasion. This is probably done with. I'm just going to remind you, if you have a question about job search, hiring better, management, leadership, or just want some advice about some workplace related issue, put your question into chat and I'll try and get to it today, okay? Here's another question. I saw a job posted on LinkedIn, but was posted 4 months ago. What does this mean? Does it mean the job role is still open? Is it worth it to apply? Let me start in reverse order. Is it worth it to apply? No. Is it worth it to message the person who's in the LinkedIn ad and to say, I just saw this posting that's 4 months old on LinkedIn. Is the position still open? And wait for a response. No response, you've just saved yourself a lot of time in filling out applications. Just ask them if it's still available. What it may mean is that they forgot to take the posting down. It may mean that they're continuously looking for people. We don't know. But if you reference, I saw a 4-month-old posting on LinkedIn for this position, is the job still open? Why is it still open after 4 months? And again, if they say yes, it's probably open because they forgot, because they're continuously looking to fill jobs like that. How many positions do you have along these lines? If you ask follow-up questions like one, maybe, and then, if it's open, you apply. If it isn't open, they'll go, thank you for bringing it to our attention. We forgot to take it down. We filled it 2 months ago. And that's more likely what happened. What happens if there's a discrepancy in a background check? Well, let's see now. I'm going to answer this question, Sanum, and I apologize if I mispronounced your first name. And I'll come back to it as soon as I'm done with this question, okay? So on the question I was answering, let me just see. I apologize. The 4-month-old job posting. How do you answer? I'm sorry. Discrepancy in a background check. That was the question. My apologies. So if they discover a discrepancy in the background check, well, I'll tell you a story. I had someone who I filled a position with, actually 2 people who come to mind, who I filled a position with, who joined an organization, and then they found out the application was false. One person had lied about their employment history, another one lied about their degree. In both cases, on the first Friday they were on board, the background check was complete, and they were brought into in the first case, lying on the application about employment history, they were brought into the head of HR where they were confronted with what they found. They acknowledged the truth and they were fired. In the case of the person who lied about the degree, they were met at their desk Friday afternoon by security, who handed them a box of their personal possessions, and they were escorted out of the building. That's what can happen. If this is pre-hire, it's likely that they'll come to you and say, "We found something incongruent in your background. We found this arrest and conviction. We found such and such." Excuse me, let me just turn off the phone ringer. We found this, we found that, and they'll shut up and make you talk. Um, and usually they'll give you a chance to explain. And sometimes it could just be as simple as, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot exactly when it was that I left there. Uh, Apparently, it was 2 months earlier. I was wrong when I filled out the application. I had no intention to deceive you. It was a mistake." And they'll listen to that story and let it go. In the case of wages, that may happen post employment, but if it happens pre-employment, they'll give you a chance to explain yourself usually, rather than rescind the offer. So that's what can happen. Let me come back to this question. What do you do if your boss is stopping you from growing? Now, I don't know how long you've been working there, and that does make a difference in how um, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. I don't know when that happened, so I'm just going to pick it up from this question. What do you do if your boss is stopping you from growing? So it's frustrating when that happens. So I'm not sure exactly when that showed up. So I'm just going to pick it up from here. You sit down with your manager and you say, "I've been doing the same work now for 2 years. I'd like to grow into something else. I know you see me as reliable and dependable, but I also want you to know that I see me as being bored and frustrated. I like working here. I don't want to leave. I'd rather get better work. No more, no threats. It's really that simple. Do not make a threat that you're going to leave. They'll get the message and try and give you different work or suggest you look at different opportunities internally. If they're going to suggest you look at different opportunities internally, then you might as well look at them externally, because externally you'll get paid more. That's the fact of it. You'll get paid more than internally. So um, I just got a quick message thanking me for sending someone a link to an interview I did with them. So if they recommend internal job hunting, do it. Keep doing a great job where you are, because it's going to keep your head screwed on right and focused in the right way. But all in all, um, look externally as well, and not just simply internally. You're welcome. I'm glad you got it. And if anyone else has a question for me, please put your question about job search, hiring better, management leadership, or advice about a particular issue in your workplace. Uh, I'd be happy to answer your question. Here's another one from someone. And if I was muted for a lengthy period of time, I'll try and fix it and bring these questions back later on. How should I answer uh, in my work appraisal the question, badly languaged, what do you want to be famous for at work? My God, what a ridiculous question. So they're only going to ask that of relatively inexperienced people. Uh, the simplest way I would uh, suggest answering it, because it's going to get their attention, because you're going to use a phrase that they're not used to seeing from people. I want to be seen as being world class, that I'm the person who has extraordinary solutions to situations, that I'm someone who everyone wants to fast track because everyone sees my potential and my abilities. And that becomes a way that you set a marker down for yourself. And you have to back it up that you want to do world class work for the organization and not just simply be ordinary. Now, if you're in a group where the expectation is they want average work from average people, well, you're transcending that. And you can use your desire to be world class at everything that you do as part of your frustration. And again, it's got to be true for you. If it isn't true for you, you talk about dependable, reliable. But they asked about famous. So I'm trying to give you an answer that responds to the word famous in their question and give you a way of dealing with that so that you stand out in a good way. Paula, I'm not sure what you mean by VAR, FYI. Um, could you elaborate upon the acronym VAR? And if this was about the audio, I discovered the hard way that I was out for a little while, and I'll go back and answer those questions next time if I was out for any length of time. So going back to the question, yeah, if you are given a chance to become a human resource manager, which qualities do you prefer to consider when hiring applicants? Skills, attitudes, talent, or pleasing personality? And why? So let me start off with a fact. Although they may extend an offer to you, human resource managers don't decide to hire people. By definition, hiring managers do. HR managers reject, they screen, they filter, and hiring managers decide who it is that they want and recommend to HR that a person be hired and ask for the salary to be formulated for this person. So HR doesn't hire, they reject. Hiring managers hire. And all the factors that you've mentioned are a part of this. Pleasing personality, I define it a little bit differently. For those of you who see me do this before, I apologize. They look for competence, self-confidence, character, chemistry, charisma. Charismatic people always do better than non-charismatics. That you care because they want to trust the person that they hire. That's it in a nutshell. They want to trust you. And thus, look for situations where you can foster trust everywhere along the line by zeroing in on those factors so that in this way, you can demonstrate that they want to hire you. So, Paula, I'm not seeing what that VAR is referencing. I'm going to let that go by. So let me just simply continue on with the next question. Why are new employers asking for pay stubs? Because when someone says they're earning a salary, sometimes they're lying. Pay stubs call the bluff. So if you say you're making $80,000 a year, your pay stubs would indicate 60. Well, they're going to come back to you and say, you said you're making 80 and the stubs say 60. What's up with that? And your response is to go, oh, well, you caught me. You caught me. And from there, you can also say, I included my bonus in that. How much is your bonus? 20,000. Okay, we've got a bonus too. So we compare salary to salary and bonus to bonus. So we're going to work on the assumption that you make $60,000 in annual salary. That's why they do it, to flush out the truth about compensation, so that in this way they're not surprised at the back end. And you don't wind up getting caught in one of those situations where you get fired at the end of your first week. Is it okay to ask for a salary raise twice in 1 year? Yeah, doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can ask. And I would, especially during these inflationary times. After all, inflation is eating up a ton of purchasing power for people. And thus, you're in a situation where, well, I'll speak in the US, after inflation, after raises in 2021, people lost 2.5% of their purchasing power, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's understating it because they don't take, in their inflation statistics, they don't take into account gas prices, which we know are up dramatically in 2021, right? And there are other things that they don't take into consideration because politicians rewrote the books some years ago. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about all politicians rewrote the books to remove certain things that would really up the number and scare people and cause them to have to pay more to people collecting Social Security like me. So they've taken certain things off the books to keep the numbers down, which gives you an idea that 7% inflation is really higher. So that's why they do it. They try and put people in the position, bear with me 1 second so I can get back into the question, where organizations can say, we're giving you a 7.5% raise and we're ahead of inflation. And you should be smart enough at that time to say, to keep me ahead of inflation, I need to get 10 because government takes part of that 7.5% and knocks it down to 4.5 or 5%. So your 7.5% raise is only 2 points behind inflation or 2.5 points behind inflation. So by all means, ask for a raise twice a year. It doesn't mean that you get it, but it does mean that you may have to change jobs to keep ahead of inflation. Why do most of the interviewers call me overqualified? I don't know. I don't know what your background is. It could be a polite kiss off to you. But I also know that there were a lot of people when I did recruiting who would apply for jobs that were a level or two down for them. So a person who was an SVP would apply for a director job. In theory, they could do it, but their salary was out of whack. They were making two bills or $200,000, and this was a job paying $150,000. They thought that I'm capable of doing that job, and you should pay me too. But no one was going to do that. So by saying overqualified, it's a polite way of saying you have too much experience for us. We can't afford you. Often that's the real reason why. What do I do if my employer is not paying contractors I hire and still wants me to continue hiring more without first paying prior ones? Whoa, that's pretty despicable. So when I'm seeing this is a US centric answer. Contractors often come in through a contracting firm rather than as individuals who are being paid. So I would basically, number one, I'm verifying that you're being paid. You're being paid. I go to my manager and go, I'm confused about something. The contractors are complaining that they're not being paid, and you want me to find new contractors. Is your intention not to pay them? Is that what's going on? So, you got to confront the situation in a diplomatic way so that you understand what the circumstances are. They may be being replaced um, for different reasons. Um, but when all is said and done, have the conversation with them so that you know. Stephen asks, other than gas, what else did they remove from determining the inflation numbers? I don't remember anymore. I'm sorry to say, Stephen, but what you can do is a Google search. Uh, I just remember that when the 7% inflation number came out, there were a number of analysts on different networks that were saying if they use the 1980s numbers, inflation was closer to 13.5% based upon the way it was computed then. Uh, I don't remember. I'm sorry, Stephen, I can't answer that one. But I just know that the real inflation number using the old formula is closer to 13 or 13.5%. Um, I'll try a Google search and message you after the show and see if I can relay that to you. Or you can do it and message me. My address on LinkedIn is linkedin.com/IN/the big game hunter. Let me come to the next question. If I did not get a job that I interviewed for, but I'm reapplying a year later, is it okay to reach out to that recruiter again? Sure, sure. If you didn't get it after 4 rounds and they chose someone else, you are more advantaged than if you didn't get it after you just spoke with them. You might just simply forget about that conversation rather than reach out to them because they're going to revert to the old notes and may have a negative impression of you from that time. But if you went multiple rounds, then by all means do so. That way it makes sense. You can say in emailing them or messaging them, you may or may not recall, but I interviewed for this role a year ago. I got to the 4th round, but another person was chosen. Doesn't seem like I did poorly, but I'm available and I would like to be considered for this one. Would you like to set up a time to speak so you can find out about what I've been doing since then? And that just moves it forward. But on the basis of a first round screening call, it doesn't really behoove you to bring it up. Let's see now. I still have a couple of questions, and I'm also starting to run out of some gas here. So let me go as hard as I can for as long as I can, okay? Does Facebook contact candidates again that perform well but did not get an offer, especially if the recruiter wants to keep in contact? And the answer was yes. They may do that. No guarantee of that. So you may wind up in a situation where, 6 months, a year later, you get a message from someone who says, I don't know if you recall, but when you interviewed at Facebook, you went through a couple of rounds. We'd like to stay in touch with people. We have a new role we'd like to talk with you about, and then move from there. I know someone who I coached had that experience, so I can speak with certainty that yes, they may contact you. And any firm may contact you that you had a previous conversation with. Now, if you were referred by a recruiter and you were contacted, I would message them and say, I've been approached by Facebook about coming back, or approached by whatever the firm is, to come back and talk with them. Take a look at your contract to see if you'd be entitled to a fee. And in the meantime, let me go through the process and don't blow this up through you and your hysteria. Terry writes, well, the dollar store is now the $1.25 store. Is that 25% inflation? For them it is, but for most people it isn't. They're trying to make a profit. They're trying to keep their margins. They're buying time because they think inflation numbers are going to go up. No, it's not indicative of $1.20 of 25% inflation. It's indicative They're increasing their margins. They think inflation is going to continue for a while, and they're trying to program that in to their calculus. I think I'm going to make this one the last question. Uh, do software engineering recruiters ever filter a candidate from the interview process after they've spoken to the candidate without forwarding the resume to the hiring team? Of course. Of course. What do you think they're paid for? Filter, screen, reject, turn down, save other people's time. You didn't demonstrate you were qualified to do this job, and thus they are rejecting you. So, yes, I know even as a third party recruiter, as I was for a long time, I rejected a lot of people. And thus, yes, it happens all the time. So, what do you think they do? So, I'm just going to check if there are any other questions. And I'm going to start my outro and say, I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did and you're watching on YouTube, give it a thumbs up, share it. Same thing as a Facebook Live, same thing on LinkedIn. Share it, leave a comment. Algorithms like comments. Click the like button. Do something that lets people know it was worthwhile, because it does help other people discover Career Coach office hours. Again, I'll be back Friday at 9:15 a.m. Eastern with more. Also going to remind you to visit my website, thebiggamehunter.us, where I've got a ton in the blog that you can watch, listen to, or read. That's going to help you find work more quickly, hire better, manage and lead better, as well as deal with different workplace issues. Also, at the site, you can find out about my different courses, and you can also schedule time for a free discovery call or schedule time for coaching. I'd love to help. Lastly, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Mention that you saw this. I like knowing I've been helping some folks. Once we're connected, your network is going to be a lot larger than it is right now, because my network tends to be a lot bigger than most people's is. Also going to say, I hope you have by the way, follow me on YouTube, jobsearchtv.com. My podcast, No BS Job Search Advice Radio, is Monday through Friday, and comes out during the night. And I do shows about job search and how to do it better. It's called No BS Job Search Advice Radio. You can follow it any place you pick up podcasts. On Spotify, it's done as a video podcast. So if you like video, that's a way that you can do it. Also, give me a thumbs up, like the show, and I hope you have a great day. Most importantly, be great. Take care.